Good morning, Lee. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you for asking, John. But more importantly, how are you?
I am absolutely fine, Lee, and it's an absolute pleasure to meet you and to learn more about your background, particularly, hailing from Hale Hall Green Stadium back in 1994. So, it'd be great to learn how you've transitioned from 1994 working at Hall Green Stadium to where you are today, head of QA at CAVU. So, without further ado, please could you introduce yourself to our audience?
Wow, how do I follow that one? So I am Leigh Rathbone, head of QA or head of quality engineering here at CAVU. Been in technology for, my God, it's 27 years now. And John, it just feels like yesterday. I can remember joining tech as a craft almost as if it was yesterday. It's been an amazing journey for me, John. I am so appreciative of being in technology.
Yeah.
The journey that I've had, the stories that I've gathered, the experiences, the people I've met, just everything, John. So 27 years, worked in 14 different companies across four continents. Almost every company has been a different sector. So I've never stayed in a specific sector like finance or retail. Everyone I've gone to has been a different kind of a different kind of sector. So that's kept it really interesting and fresh. So that's me. I'm married. I've got two children. I'm an Aston Villa fan, but please don't punish me for that one, folks. I love real ale, so I will be having, as it's Friday, I will be having a real ale tonight, John. And my football team is Aston Villa, as I say, so I'm a season ticket holder. I travel the country, and now I follow Aston Villa around Europe as well because we're in Europe. So it's happy times, John, from where I'm from.
Absolutely, and it's great to hear, and it's great to learn more about Aston Villa. And they are traversing the globe with regards to their football capability. So it's always good to learn more about that. Brilliant, amazing. So my first question then, Lee, is looking back at your career, you've worked on groundbreaking innovations like the first touchscreen mobile phone, the first smartwatch, the foundation of streaming technology. What was the common thread you've seen in disruptive technology over the years?
Well, as this is a visual recording, and it's almost as if I've come prepared, John. I do have, or let me see if that will pick it up. Oh, it's because I've got a background. This is the world's first touchscreen smartphone. It's the Sony Ericsson P800.
Yeah,
This was 2003. This launched on the market.
right.
It had Microsoft Office on it, so it had Word, PowerPoint, Excel. It had a zero point 0.3 megapixel camera, zero point 0.3, let that sink in, but it
Wow.
was groundbreaking.
Yeah.
It was a fantastic piece of technology. And
Yeah.
you mentioned the world's first smartwatch as well. So, as if by magic, John, I do have the world's first smartwatch here to show our
Absolutely.
listeners, your listeners. They're not our listeners, they're yours, sorry.
I
So
was
that's the
there.
world's first smartwatch. And this, John, this was 2005.
Wow.
And on my wrist, I do have a smartwatch, some
Mhm.
some God, 20 years on. And I think the first part to answer your question is the first sort of themes I picked up on is when you're working on cutting edge technology that then becomes mainstream, it's very rarely you're working on cutting edge technology. So when I worked on that and I worked on the foundations of streaming, I had no idea streaming would become what it is today.
Mhm.
We just went to work and did our jobs. And the roles I played, by the way, were minute. The roles I played in the world's first touchscreen smartphone, the world's first smartwatch streaming, the foundations, my part was tiny. So I'm not claiming to be the inventor of these technologies, but I played a part. And the themes I pick out is everything back in the day seemed to take 10 years, John.
Mhm.
So when we launched this phone, 2003, touchscreen smartphones didn't really become the critical mass till around about 2013. So you can say that had a 10-year sort of span where it was finding its feet.
Yeah.
It was growing slowly. And this was a reoccurring theme with cutting edge technology when it launched. The smartwatch that I showed yourself and the audience, 2005, 2015, you could almost sense that smartwatches would become a critical mass.
Mhm.
Streaming. So if you go from 2005, you can almost say, Spotify, they were becoming the critical mass in what, 2014, but their first solution was a desktop, by the way, it wasn't streaming.
Yeah.
They then moved into streaming. So you can almost say this 10-year itch, this 10-year incubation period
Mhm.
was a thing, but I think that's gone. And I think it's gone, John. The
Right.
reason being
Yeah.
the launch, and we'll come to AI later, but the launch of ChatGPT, particularly the Gen AI, that went from, launch on November, I think the 30th, 2022.
Mhm.
Within a week, it smashed all records. Almost everyone had heard of it, played with it, dabbled with it, experimented with it,
Yeah.
had an account. That's remarkable, a week. So we've gone from 10-year incubation to things like Gen AI now, which took a week to sort of get there. And that is an incredible, complete shift
Mhm.
in time span, isn't it? It's remarkable.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. And I think, that's from just following on from what you just shared, it seems like, these types of cutting edge technologies will further accelerate other developments in the space. So, the iteration of the smartwatch in 10 years' time could be an absolute game breaker, and I'm sure it will be. It could be,
Oh,
one just can't fathom what that could be like, but it's an ever evolving environment, and yeah, it just makes you look forward to what's the art of the possible with regards to technology
yeah.
innovations out there.
I think as well, John, going back to your question, what was the theme? What was it like? What was the experiences of working on cutting edge technology? We felt like explorers.
Yeah,
So you're too old to remember this, John, but when the original Star Trek series came out with James T. Kirk,
yeah,
the opening sentence on that was going on a 5-year mission into the unknown. Well, that's what it felt like. We felt like explorers. We felt like James T. Kirk on the Starship Enterprise going into the unknown.
yeah,
We didn't know how to do automation on a smartphone. We didn't know how IoT worked and how messages would reach the smartwatch. We didn't know about performance testing on a phone. All of this was brand new.
mhm,
And it was like we had to get creative and
mhm,
we had to have solution based thinking.
yeah,
We had to think very, very differently because the desktop solutions that were the critical mass at that point, so everybody was building desktop solutions or websites, whatever.
mhm,
We were on a handset, we were building streaming, we were building smartwatches, and we were like, this is not just software, it's hardware as well.
mhm.
So we had to think very, very differently. And I think that, to answer your question, I know I've rambled on with this one, but
Yeah,
I think that would be one of my main takeaways as well is when you go into the unknown, you have to clear your mind and you have to think differently. You can pull on experiences, but
okay.
you're going to have to get into new ways of thinking mentality very quickly.
Absolutely, absolutely. Reacting to what you see and not necessarily reacting to previous experiences. So absolutely understood. Brilliant.
Can I bring? I don't know whether we need to move on to another question, but I do have a little example that I can use, John, to
Yeah, yeah,
show
yeah, yes,
bring that
please.
to
Yeah,
life. Is that okay?
yeah,
So this a later version of this phone that we were working on. We were. I know this sounds really daft now, but we were downloading music from a website on the phone and then rendering that music file in a music player. Now, that today, you say that to any 18-year-old, they'll go, what? You downloaded a file? But this was before streaming, don't forget. So
yeah,
you had to physically, on the phone, go to a website, usually from Vodafone or one of the operating providers, download a music file. It would download, it would store it in the file system. The music player then would scan this particular file system and pick up the file. So it showed in the music player. You could then play that music in the music player. That was the process on that phone. However, would you be shocked, John, if I told you to do that? It was 27 clicks for the end user to do that.
wow.
27.
Yeah,
27 clicks, John.
yeah, yeah,
So when we looked at it, we were like, this is but and we went and looked at a Siemens phone. Believe it or not, Siemens used to be one of our competitors. They were the third biggest mobile phone seller in the world at one point.
right.
They did it in 9 clicks.
Wow.
And we were like, what have we done? We've over engineered something that should be dead simple to the end user.
Yeah,
So there's a great example of brand new ways of thinking, developing new technology, hitting a stumbling block, looking at it from the end user's experience and going, that's not good enough.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for sharing an example. It's a real like sort of user experience testing point of view with regards to
Yeah,
reduce the number of clicks that's going to give the best user experience for your customers, whether it be being able to listen to music. So absolutely understood,
yeah.
and thank you for sharing. Wow. Okay. So you were part of PlayStation's four-person development team, where technology was implemented before Sony even knew how to use it. How do you approach building tech for an unknown future?
Well, that is such a tough question because I think the if we peel away that to its bare bones, and just for the audience, the story here is I was at PlayStation, the PS3 was a huge success, and the discussion started around what should the PS4 look like, what should the tech look like, what should the controller look like. And I was very, very lucky enough to be flown over to San Francisco to a smaller group where we had more discussions around what should it look like, what should the tech be. And the very, very clever people in Sony PlayStation, which exclude me, I'm talking proper clever people. The word I'm looking for here, John, to answer your question, is bravery. That they were brave and they sold a vision whereby the PS4 would still be used in 10 years' time. And when they were brave and when they sold that, then the question is, how can we make it relevant in 10 years' time? Because we don't know what the future looks like.
Mhm.
And then the answer became simpler. It was about the chips. What are the most powerful chips out there right now for all the components, the hardware that makes a gaming console? Break it down. What's out there now that's cutting edge? Let's bring it in. And that was basically the decision process was we don't know how to use some of this stuff, but we know technology moves at such a rate, we'll know within 2, 3 years. And
Yeah.
instead of having to then put all this development time into another new console, the tech will already be in there. And it was an incredible decision. I wasn't part of that decision. I was in the room having like listening to these clever people. What an amazing experience when you see people being brave
Yeah.
and when the leadership on board and go, we're going to back you. And I think that's a key thing, John. The
Yeah.
high people in Sony PlayStation said, we'll believe in you, we'll back you, because we had the top brains in the world at PlayStation at those points. And we were up against Microsoft. It was a proper war. We
Mhm.
both launched our new platforms, our consoles, within a week of each other. So the PlayStation 4 and then the Microsoft equivalent, and we absolutely annihilated Microsoft for a number of reasons. But I think the tech inside the PlayStation 4, my son's PlayStation 4 is still going. And it's what, 2025, and it's still going,
Yeah.
still boots up, still works. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think absolutely agreed. It's always a case where you've got the vision, which is by the boots on the ground, i.e., the developers, all those sort of key stakeholders, but it's ultimately the C-suite that needs to give the backing in order for that vision to take place. So it's great that you were in that
All
environment,
day long.
and they gave you that backing because without that, it would be a bit of a challenge. And I can imagine that,
Oh,
you know, you can imagine the amount of prototypes or the amounts of demonstrations to get everyone on side must have taken a while. So that's quite an achievement by your team.
oh. And it's the cost as well, John.
Yeah.
So the cutting edge chips in those days, you're going to have to pay extra for those cutting edge chips that have only just been released. And that's what Sony PlayStation did. And
Yeah.
it nudged the price of the console up, obviously. But
Yeah.
what an investment. What
Yeah.
brilliant insight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Brilliant. So with 14 companies in 27 years, you've shown that culture and alignment matter to you. What makes you stay or leave at a company? And what advice would you have for tech leaders building strong teams?
Wow. God, these questions are tough, John. Jesus. So
Right.
for me, I think my experience is whenever I go into a new company, there's a love. There's a loving, isn't there? There's a honeymoon period. And how long does that last? Well, I always believe if I love a company and a company loves me, we're in a happy place.
Yeah.
If I'm being rewarded for the innovation, the energy, the high performing teams that I know I can build, if I get rewarded and acknowledged, the happiness stays, the love stays. My experience also tells me that that love can break at some point either side. And it could be the company falls out of love with you, or you fall out of love with the company.
Mhm.
And when I sense that, because my spidery senses are quite attuned to this, John,
Yeah.
I tend to go, okay, there's a breaking of this love. Can it be repaired
Mhm.
either side? Or is it a time just to say, it's time to part?
Mhm.
And that's where I've been brave and gone, okay, I think I need to find something new where I can get that love. But there's another angle on this, John. At PlayStation, I walked in and I had a month to observe how PlayStation worked in order for me to gather my thoughts and what innovation and change I wanted to bring.
Yeah.
Laid out the observations I'd seen and then my plan to change PlayStation. I said to my director, this will take 3 years for me to land this change and I will then go. And his jaw dropped. He'd never actually heard somebody say, by the way, in 3 years I'm going because I will have. And it was new. And he went, yeah, right. And I left PlayStation 3 years and 1 month. So
Wow.
I missed it by one. That was probably because my notice period. I had to set my notice period. But that's one of my principles is I can deliver something. And if there's nothing else the company want to give me or can give me, because not all companies can keep promoting you. There's not an endless amount of like CEO jobs or director jobs or heads of jobs. Somebody has to leave in order for you to be promoted sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, that's an ending of the love. And I'm quite happy to say, I think I've done you proud. I've done me proud. I'll go and find another challenge. And I'm quite comfortable in my own skin doing that.
Really good. That's really good. I think that's really good. I think that's really, demonstrates that you are authentic. You are absolutely passionate about not only delivering what's best for the organization, but also what's best for you and your environment and your journey and your career. And yeah, that's really positive. That's really great to hear. Absolutely. So your leadership, you said your leadership is about how people feel once you part ways. How do you balance technical excellence with building a strong and positive team culture?
Said these questions were tough, didn't I? Wow.
Yeah, Lee's up
Well,
soon.
thanks, John, making me think. Well, I have got a saying on my board that I'll probably read out in a minute. The saying is, I think leadership is how you make people feel about themselves way after you've left them. So I would like to think that the people I've led and coached and mentored and helped grow, um, way after I'm out their lives, they're feeling strong about themselves, and I think
Yeah,
that's probably the essence of where that saying has come from. I also believe in this saying, which I'd like to read out from my whiteboard over there, John. So just I will look that way while I do it. I,
absolutely.
I also think leadership is about giving hope, belief, and a vision in order to breed curiosity, knowledge, and experience. And I think that is almost another sort of essence of leadership. There's loads of different sort of, if you Google leadership, give me a trendy quote. Some of these might come out because I think I've stolen that from someone, John. But to get
Right.
back to,
That's all right.
but I
Absolutely.
steal everything. I'm not original. But to answer your question around, how do you get the balance between technical and the people side it's really hard. I
Yeah.
think leadership is one of the hardest things in the world, John, because you're dealing with humans who are all unique.
Yeah.
You're dealing with everybody that has different biases, different diversities, different religions, different backgrounds. And I think this is something I don't think I will ever conquer or say, yes, I've done this, I've got this balance right. I think I struggle every day trying to get this balance right because technically you want people to be technically brilliant, but you have to understand where people's ceilings are.
Yeah.
For me, I tend to focus a lot on culture and building a strong team ethos
Yeah.
because I think you can build technical skills to a certain extent
Mhm.
afterwards. As long as you've got the right people with the open mindset, the curiosity, they want to take their self development. And there's a key word, John, self development. I don't own your self development, John. You own your self development.
Yeah.
CAVU don't own my self development. I own my self development. CAVU can put a framework in place. They can put support, coaches, mentors, courses, but I own it. So building that team and trying to get the balance right for me is get the right people.
Yeah.
It's all about the people.
Yeah.
Technology is about the people. And I think we lose that sometimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I think, where we've talked about, I know in previous conversation we've talked about, uh, whether it be AI and sort of the potential disaster that potentially is awaiting around the corner. We've say, for example, generative AI accelerating development, you know, what are the biggest risks companies need to be aware of and what steps they should take to prevent them, should I say, is really, really important. What could you say that could be? How does that resonate with you?
The AI disaster waiting to happen, or yeah.
Yes.
Well, shall I bring that to life a little bit, John, for the audience? Because I know we had a brief chat about it, and it's a wacky sort of angle I've got in my head about this Gen AI stuff. So I'll answer that, and then I'll come to sort of what I think the companies can do to avert it. Is that okay, John?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Brilliant.
Cool. So what's in my head? Okay, so Gen AI